Jazakallah khairan. So before we let the admin open up the chat feature for people to ask the questions, a lot of questions in these presentations we get are out of scope of what Brother Yusuf has talked about. So I suppose he reserves the right to actually review the questions and which ones he wants to answer, because we want to stay on topic. What Brother Yusuf, if possible, we'd like you to read the question so it gets recorded and then answer it. So admin, if you can open up the chat feature for everybody, we will review the questions, and whichever is in scope of this presentation, we'll try to answer and take as many of those as we can, inshallah. If you want to raise your hands, that feature is already open to you. If you have a question, raise your hand and we'll go from there. Click on so the chat is now open for everybody if you have any questions. So while we're doing that, Brother Yusuf, I have a question for you. Yes, there are. Somebody's asked, are the short videos available on the website? Yes, they are on sreislamic.org. Before we get to the rest of the questions, brother, do you know the differences between the legality of it between Wales, Scotland, and England? If you're aware of some subtle differences, if you can point out, that'd be great.
So I think my focus has been in England.
The chat window for the videos.
So my focus has been mainly in England. I think the difference is there's a later implementation in I believe in Wales, and I think in Wales they were speaking about the complete removal of the right to withdraw, and in Scotland there's a slightly different situation. But I'm not fully aware of those two countries. But I'm going to maybe look into whether it's possible to look into that and then support organisations and massages within Scotland and Wales who have contacted me in the past, and maybe we could do something for parents in those parts of the country.
Okay. My second question is, you've done a lot of research, mashallah, on this topic, right? Are there any resources that you've come across which are more favorable to the Islamic point of view, that you could say, what parents to go into a board of governance meeting or something to saying to their schools, look into this set of resources for the schools?
In terms of, there are some resources that have been produced by the other faith groups, and there's a website called rseauthentic.uk, which shows some of those resources. But the only thing is that what I found in my experience that schools will generally look to the main resource providers, and usually those will be recommended by the local authority, or they'll be used by other schools. And so it's usually it's like an uphill struggle to try and convince a school to use resources that are not from a major resource provider like Pearson or like other providers like Jigsaw. And so the best approach really would be not to discount a whole set of resources, but rather to look through the resources and outline or just speak about aspects of the resources that you find to be inappropriate. And that will be much easier to withdraw for the school to take away some of those aspects, rather than to, for example, some schools who have bought, maybe they've spent about £2,000-3,000 on the initial license for a resource. Now, if you say to the school, look, we don't want this at all, the school's going to say, no, we've already paid for them. So what's best to do is to try and say, okay, these aspect resources are fine, and these are not. And I think that's the best approach.
Okay, Jazakallah. We've got some questions, so if you want to go through them, read them out first, and then if you want.
There's one question here. It says, I'm a co-opted governor and a parent at a school. How can I pose this question to the board? Do the materials used need to be shared with parents? Can I suggest that parents are invited to see the materials used? I think that's a really important question. I think as a governor in a school, I think your role is to be someone who ensures that the governing board fulfill their statutory requirements with regards to implementation of these subjects. So you've got to really say in the governing board meeting is have we done to consult with parents? There's a statutory requirement to consult parents with the draft copy of the policy so that parents can input into that. And there's also a requirement to ensure the resources are appropriate. So really, I completely agree with you. You need to say to the governing board, we need to ensure that conflict doesn't happen in our school. And the best way to do that is to ensure that parents are consulted, their views are taken into account, and that this is done in a very open and transparent way. Otherwise, you have problems later on. So I think your role is very important, and I completely agree with that. You need to get the governing board to engage with a clear and transparent consultation process with parents. Another question here is failing all meetings and consultations with a school if they do not change anything, or if we think that the content is still too explicit, what do we do as a last resort? So I think it depends. In a primary school, if they're using explicit resources, then that would really be in sex education classes, which you can still withdraw from. In a primary school, you have the full right to withdraw from any sex education classes that are taught. What is statutory is the relationship education classes. And so you just got to make sure that the school is sticking to the learning outcomes as set out in the relationship education learning outcomes. It doesn't go beyond that or try to broaden out the learning outcomes to beyond that. So I think obviously firstly it's really work with other parents to ensure that the consultation is run correctly. But what you definitely need to do is make sure you have a clear audit trail. What that means is that you have emails, you have letters that you send, and responses from the school. If the school is not sometimes being transparent, to make sure communications are in writing, yeah, so that you have something there, because there may be scope in future for a legal challenge against schools, against the government, against the way this guidance has been both drafted and implemented. And so I think it's very important that is done. Now, in terms of the last resort you really have is to take your children out from school, homeschool them, put them in an Islamic school. You've got other options there, but really what's more important is that you try and minimize the harm that these will have on your children in school. But what you need to do nonetheless, whatever you do in school, you keep that communication with your children going. Make sure you keep asking them what they're learning at school. Make sure you are taking responsibility for the tarbiyah of your children. That means that you are developing their character, developing their thinking around these subjects. They know that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created them male and female. They know that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has prohibited completely relationships outside of marriage between a man and a woman. They know these simple things. They know that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the one that they should worship and obey. They know that's the starting point and the ending point for them to evaluate different ideas. I think that's also hugely important. Another question is, when we asked about pulling our kids from sex education classes, we were told that if the material is covered in science curriculum, you cannot take them out of them, but you can take them out of other aspects that are not statutory for science. Do you know what is statutory for the science curriculum? So yeah, firstly, what you need to really do is speak to the school and find out what they are teaching in the science curriculum. For example, on the website, I'll just show you very quickly, and then you can have a look in your own time. On the website, you've got some frequently asked questions, and in there is a question about the science curriculum, and it goes through Key Stage 1, Key Stage 3, and Key Stage 4, what is required. And so you can say to the school, what are you teaching in that? Because sometimes schools will over-teach what is required in science. For example, some schools will say human reproduction is a part of the science curriculum at primary schools. That is not true. That is absolutely not true. So I think where you can look through this is in the FAQ section of the website, and go back to school and ask them what they're teaching in those classes, so that you can then say, where is this a requirement in science? The next question is, My school has stated that the local authority will be developing the curriculum. They claim that this covers the consultation process and therefore will not be consulting the parents from the school. Is it acceptable for the local authority in schools? You know, this is not. No. Local authorities are not legally required to consult. Schools are legally required to consult. That's very clear. Now, what you need to do is make sure that you ask the question and you have it in writing what they've said, because this is something that will need to be challenged at some point. It's really important that you start to build an audit thread of this. But I think really it's very important to get the school to clarify this and say, no, actually, even if the local authority have consulted, yeah, because they're not going to consult parents at that school, they're going to consult another body, yeah. When it comes to this, if, for example, the local authority decide on a model policy for the whole local authority area, or they decide on resources for the local authority area, when it comes to schools, schools will still have to, as a legal requirement, consult with parents at that school, and they will have to make changes. So either they take away things from the resources or they add things to resources, depending upon parental views. Make sure you have this in writing and keep in touch, because there is at some point will be a need, if this is happening widely, there will be a need to start to challenge some of these things. Okay, so can parents legally withdraw their children from RSC if they're deemed to be inappropriate due to the child's age or religious background? If yes, how can they go about doing it? So really, in primary schools, you can withdraw from the sex education classes, but not relationship education. And in secondary school, you can withdraw from the sex education as part of RSC. You can make a request to withdraw to the head teacher, but you can't withdraw from the relationship education aspect in the secondary school. And so you can't just take the children out. Legally, that wouldn't be acceptable. I think really it's about trying to shape how these subjects are going to be taught. It's about really telling schools, look, the bottom line is we don't want conflict in schools. What happened in Birmingham should not happen here. Yeah. And so really they need to listen to parents and ensure that they do their part, ensuring that conflict does not happen. And that's what we all need to do. Yeah? I think that's really what we need to make very clear to schools. If they start to say we don't want to consult with parents, we're just looking for that what we want, then parents are going to feel as though they're not being listened to, and the same ingredients for conflict that arose in Birmingham will happen in other areas, which we don't want. So really, we need to say to schools, let's stop conflict, let's work together, let's find a solution that meets all of our needs. Another question is, can the schools change the science curriculum to include the sex ed stuff we withdraw children from? And can parents request the science curriculum from school? So firstly, no. The science curriculum requirements are set out on our website are the requirements. They can't add anything to those requirements. They can't teach, for example, aspects of sex education that is non-statutory in science classes, because this is going beyond the scope of what science requirements are at key stage 1, 3, 5, and beyond. You really, you can ask the school for a copy of their syllabus that is mapped to the curriculum, and then you can clarify what they're teaching and whether they're going beyond what is required. Another question. Assalamu alaikum, brother. Wa alaikum salam. I have talked to head teacher of our school, and I was told it would be one lesson about 20 minutes long. Have you come across things like that? We'd be willing to talk to a head teacher if we need your input. Some schools are trying to meet the requirements in the most basic way. Yeah? They want to fulfill their statutory requirements, the legal requirements, but they don't want to go beyond that and go into lots and lots of hours, because the curriculum doesn't set out a time amount. It doesn't say you have to do 20 minutes a day or half an hour a week or 2 hours every fortnight. That's up to school. As long as the school fulfills the requirements of the curriculum, which are not huge, then that's enough. So this is really good. I think that's really good that head teachers approached you in that way and clarified that. And he said, "Will you be willing to talk to our head teacher if we need your input?" Yeah, inshallah, please contact me if you need any further help. Another question from another brother. Sex education element in primary school is not mandatory. However, they can teach elements of the same topic in KSHE or science lessons. So we've answered that. So just so the correct answer is really just to ensure that the school can clarify what they're teaching in science, map to the curriculum, and they're not going beyond that. And that's very important. And then academy school is stating that their trust will be deciding what will be taught. They have not mentioned any parental involvement. Can this be challenged? Yeah, you know, the thing is that academy, they've been used to teaching their, because academies teach the curriculum as they want. They're not bound by national curriculum as other schools are. So they're used to doing things in a particular way. But the requirement for RE and RSE is that the guidance is for all schools. It's for maintained schools, it's for academies, it's for free schools, it's for faith schools. All schools are subject to that guidance. So that means that even academies have to consult with parents. They have to engage parents in the consultation process before the policy is written, and they have to also engage parents. They have to ensure that their materials have regard to the age and religious backgrounds of the pupils at that school. The same requirements are for academies as for other schools. But the thing is, academies sometimes are chain academies. They've got 10 or 20 schools across the country, and sometimes centrally these things will be decided. So really, you need to say that this is a requirement for your school just as much as every other school. And there always are complaints procedures that you can escalate. And if you need any further information about that, we can help you, inshallah. How we discuss LGBT concerns without coming across as homophobic. I think the simple thing is we say that children need to be taught that they need to respect and be kind to everybody. That's what we want, isn't it? We don't need for children to know about the specifics of every single lifestyle, isn't it? To be kind to everybody, isn't it? We don't need for children to know the specifics of Islam to be kind to a Muslim child. Non-Muslim child to be kind to a Muslim child. I don't need to know the specifics about every single lifestyle or family structure to be kind to another person. So all we say is that, look, children should just be taught that they should be kind to everybody else. And even, the family background of all the people within a class needs to be reflected in what's taught. So if a child has a single mother, then and the teacher says, Sally has a single mother, that's not a problem. Even in a class, if John has two mothers looking after him, and the school says John has two mothers looking after him and doesn't go into detail about their lifestyle, about that in any other detail, then that's not a problem. But when schools start to go beyond the factual information and go into specifics and impose their value judgments upon our children or any children and say this is correct and this is incorrect. No, we have differences about what is correct and what is incorrect. Some people think drinking is allowed. We don't. Some people think relationships outside of marriage is allowed. We don't. There are differences in value positions, and schools should not get involved in value positions. They should just talk about factual positions and not beyond that. It seems, my brother says, it seems all we're trying to do is to water down the content that is being planned to be taught. Is there no way to stop it altogether? No, we can't, because unless you can convince all of the MPs in Parliament to repeal an act of Parliament which they agreed to, there's no way of doing that. We live in a secular liberal society. This is not a society based upon our moral viewpoint. That doesn't mean we can't challenge things, and we shouldn't challenge things. We should. There's scope for lots of challenges. I was speaking to a non-Muslim man who's starting a legal challenge against RE and RSE from the perspective that they believe, and it's quite a strong case, they believe that the right to withdraw should not have been taken away from parents. That there's a legal right that parents have to withdraw their children from all aspects of sex education, and they withdrew that right, and so there's a scope to challenge that. So they've started to challenge that, and we're looking to support them in that. And so there's areas in which we can challenge, and now and in the future, but there's sometimes limits to what we can and cannot do. But I think what we need to do is also focus on those things we can do, yeah, especially focusing upon the tarbiyah of our families, which we are in full control over. Yeah, what we teach, what we bring into the home, what we teach our children, what we role model in terms of our behavior, all of this is within our control. So we should focus on the things that are in our control, not our. Are there any resources available that you recommend for independent Islamic schools that is considered about the faith of the students? I'm not aware of anything that's available. There may be something that maybe we can look into. What a project that I'm trying to do is trying to create some sort of alternative resource for community based upon our values viewpoint. That's still at the earlier stages of being created, but there's a lot of scope for us. There's a lot of Islamic resources out there anyway for different aspects. But then there's something else that we can also bring in to that to help parents, which inshallah we'll be doing soon, inshallah. I'm a parent governor also in the consultation group. My son has finished school. My term finishes in October. School says my son has finished. I will not be able to continue these meetings. Is this allowed? If your son's finished school, then you're no longer a parent in that school. If that's what you mean, the term finishes in October. Maybe I need some more clarification on this to give a more clarity on that, because I need to understand fully that maybe either you can provide some more clarity in the chat, or email me at yusuf@sre.org with more details of that, and then I can help you, inshallah. The next question is, RSC will need to be taught in private schools too. This is through school based on a religious ethos. This is why some Orthodox Jewish schools have said no to this new topic being taught in their schools, and it has even said they will take the hit on any ostentating outcome. Yeah, that is very true. That is true. I think the Orthodox Jewish schools have been very clear that they don't want this to be taught in their schools, and they said that they're very clear on that. These requirements are going to be taught to all schools, and it'll be. I think it's really important that we empower Muslim schools to really stick to our ethos. Yeah, there's sometimes there comes situations where the situation, the pressure will force some Muslim schools to teach things that go beyond our ethical and moral viewpoints. But I think we need to really support Muslim schools to stand up to that and say, no, we believe in certain value judgments, value propositions, and we're going to teach that to our children. I found out that schools PSHE days talk about LGBT. Do you have the right to challenge this? You can speak to the school, but because PSHE is not an area in which schools have to consult, and is not an area in which parents can withdraw, it becomes very difficult. But I think it's really important to engage with your discussion with your head teacher at your school and talk about what your concerns are about this as well. The requirement to teach LGBTQ in schools as an integrated topic should the primary choose to do this, whether it's in year 1 to year 6, will they choose to sneak this into maths, English, and other subjects and through library books on a regular basis? Schools will always try. Schools may. Some schools that want to teach this will try different avenues to sneak in to the curriculum, different discussions. So, for example, when around the time of Gay Pride or other times of the year, they will start to discuss these things with children. And I think really we need to have discussions with schools about this. But most importantly, if our children do hear these things, that we need to give them an alternative viewpoint on that. One of the problems is sometimes is that our children come across things, whether in schools or in the wider society, that go against our teaching, but nobody counteracts the views that they've been given. So they go away with thinking that's the position that I should believe in because my teacher said it, everybody else says it. Really, we need to sometimes, and we do all the time, We just say reinforce to our children what our value positions are about a whole host of topics. Yeah? If we don't, how are our children meant to know this is what we believe? So it's really important that as part of the tarbiyah that we give to our children, that we ensure that we they understand our position, our Islamic position, and they know what we believe. Are there any other questions? I think that the sister who said, I still don't understand fully. If you mean that the school has said that after your child leaves in October, or after your child leaves at the end of the school year, you'll not be able to take part in the consultation meeting, then if you're not a parent at that school when the consultation takes place, then you can't take part in that consultation process. If you mean something else, then please do provide some clarity to that. I'm not too sure if you mean something else, what you mean, inshallah. But
Yeah.
please do contact, send clarity in chat box if you can.
Yeah, so that question is whether, once when your child leaves school, whether you're able to participate in the consultation process or be part of the board of governance. That's a school policy question, and it differs from school to school. Some schools allow you to continue to do that for another year, or some schools they say no, you cannot be. So that's a little bit out of scope of this presentation. But what I'm going to do is, Brother Yusuf has talked about his email. So his email is now in the chat window, Yusuf, YUSUF @sreislamic.org. So if you have any specific questions, feel free to email it to him, inshallah, and he'll be able to, I'm sure, assist the parents via email.
Another question is, will you have a training session for parents to teach their children how to teach children express views respectfully in schools? In the future, inshallah, we do want to have much more sessions, not just about school-based SRE or RE or RSE, but we also want to talk about how we can inculcate or how we can pass on our values to our children. So it's very, very important. So in the future, we want to do this. It's very important that we do this, that we empower our community to address this, and that parents do discuss these things with their children, and that parents are open to children coming to them and asking them about anything, everything that they've come across as well. The point here is, will most schools probably continue with implementing the policy regardless of time lost due to COVID? Really, we don't know until we approach the school. So I would say, if I were to say to you, yes, that is the case, then that's not the correct answer. The correct answer is, if you go to your school and ask them, your children's school, and ask them what their plans are, if there is delayed implementation and the answer they give is the answer that you really need, I think the first thing to do is really approach schools and find out what their plans are. Because for me, I'm not in a position to tell you what's going to happen in the thousands of schools that are across the country. Some schools will try and implement it without consulting parents. But really, what's important is that you have we can build up the evidence of this. Because if schools are not fulfilling the requirements under the guidance, in the future there may be a need to do a legal challenge on that. And if that is the case, we need lots of evidence for this as well.
Yeah, just to re-emphasize what the brothers talked about a few times, you might want to, in addition to speaking to someone in school, you might want to send an email or a letter and get the response in writing. So you don't need to be very good in writing, just an email to say, what is the process, and let them respond to you so you can collect all this evidence for future purposes. Okay, Jazakallah khairan, Brother Yusuf. There are no other questions. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reward you in the next couple of weeks, inshallah. So, Jazakallah khairan, everyone. May Allah ta'ala reward you for your time. It shows your interest and it shows your concern in the tarbiyah and the upbringing of your children. Which YouTube channel? This will be on the Wifaqul Ulama YouTube channel, and also I'm sure that Brother Yusuf will share it on his own YouTube channel as well. Okay, it'll be shared in many channels. You'll be able to find it, inshallah. Okay, Jazakallah khairan. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.